Well, hey, man, it's great to meet you. Thank you for taking a minute out. And I want to begin our conversation with what we lived through for the last 3.5 years, specifically as a CEO and just being an active businessman. How did you survive the pandemic and how did it change you?
That's a pretty deep question because yeah, let me just give you some so we started the business in 2017. So as we approached 2020, we were beginning to start raising money. Now we've got a founder funder, a family office that had started the business prior to me joining. And so I was in New York in March of 2020, where you're starting to see people wearing masks. It was like a science fiction movie.
Yeah.
You're at the absolute zenith of Manhattan, right? I mean, just the money was flowing. It was a world attraction beyond world attractions, packed from bow to stern of people. But you're starting to see some fraying of society, people wearing masks, people avoiding one another. It was getting really weird. I came back, my wife and I I went from New York to a flight to Iceland,
Wow.
right? So we booked this trip. Our kids stayed home with my wife's sister, and it was in Iceland. We had a 10-day trip. 6 days into it, Trump's like, I'm closing the border. Like, oh shit, we got to get back. And uh they separated the Americans at the airport. I remember that. Like, they had their own line. They
Wow.
want them out.
Yeah.
And so we actually got tested while on the line in in Iceland. We were separated, had special planes to get back. As soon as we get in Boston, it's like, where did you come from? Like, right, we're from Iceland, but we're from the States. Yeah, just come on in. Yeah, like the US had, the dichotomy is what I'm saying is
Yeah.
you're seeing a complex global issue going around and no universal way of attacking it. Immediately I came back into the office and we didn't let it, we were debating, do we put people on some form of, they're just going to send them home and like push pause for a while, or we're going to let people go. So we had like 3 or 4 days of conversations with our investors, and finally our investors, once the main one is a family member of the Dolan family who owns the Cleveland Guardians. And their feeling was, listen, no one is going to lose their job because of COVID.
Yeah.
David, I'm recording at the moment. I share an officer, chief creative officer.
Nice.
So he's ringing bells that I have up for my dog, and I got the dog in the office too. So
That's good.
it's all right.
It's all good. It's
It's all
improv.
fun. Yeah, no, totally. So um, that was the last I saw my employees for 2 years. Actually, in March of 2020, we sent everybody home, didn't let anybody go, and we just continued to produce our slate of shows, and we were adding more on the partner side. And I sat in an office by myself. We had a whole floor in this building. It's a real small medical building, and I was the only one there for 2 years, which the entire building disappeared overnight. I was the only one in. It was psychologically starting to weigh on me near the end, because I was just weird driving, to this building, the only one in there. I'd see the same security people, same janitorial crew. It was wearing on them too. During COVID, we bought this building that we're in. It was an old radio station that we decided to turn into a podcast studio. And that we opened this in March of 2022 was the first time I saw my employees in 2 years.
Wow.
So I had to learn how to lead by not even being there. Like you're not physically present. You're just an essence coming through a Zoom call or an email. And how do you manage by just being an essence? That is super hard and super challenging. And we've always had a close culture. I mean, seems like no one leaves the company. We've been here 7 years. I think over those 7 years, 4 employees have left.
Wow.
one of which went to Marvel Entertainment. Like, how do you say no to that?
Yeah.
And she was like sheepish. Oh, Marvel called. I'm so sorry. Like, what are you sorry about? Like, you got to go. I mean, it's Marvel. She's welcome back, of course, but we just never lost anybody. And so to kind of go through this where I thought I was going to lose everybody, and we're at this point where we started to hit that hockey stick. And so it was a little nerve-wracking. And I was also fighting. This is interesting you bring this up because now I remember this. Just before COVID hit, two of my millennial employees who were running pretty substantial parts of the business at the time came to me and like, we love you, we love the company, love the invest, love it, but your temper sometimes can be a little off-putting. You got to work on that. That's the one thing that we think might help your leadership, as a CEO. I really took that to heart. Like, I don't want to be, the blue meanie, so to speak. I wanted to, I want to foster an environment where the creatives create and the managers manage, and it's a good fluid environment for everybody. And they said it in my marriage too, like there's some angst and friction in the marriage too. And I got an email in my box. It was crazy message. It's like, are you an entrepreneur going through a difficult time, anger issues or pressure? I'm like, yeah, that's me. And it was from a local university. So I answered back like, yeah, this is me. And they're like, yeah, we're going to give you free coaching for these types of issues. So that was one good thing that came out of COVID was I got training in anger management and how not to, be that way. But wow, the macro issues you can't control.
Yeah.
A global pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
How do you manage from that? And what people want out of that chaos is some form of, routine.
Yeah.
They want to get back into a routine, right? Because we're all creatures of habit. And that was the big thing we wanted to impress was like, all right, I know everything's going to go off site now, but how do we maintain that? And it was a challenge for sure. A lot of communication, pushed my communication skills probably to their limit.
Yeah, well, that's amazing that you retained everybody. So let's get to the heart and soul of what you do on a daily basis. I'm going to put you in front of a bunch of third graders. It's career day. One of the kids looks up and says, "What do you do for a living?" How do you answer that child?
I said we record conversations, the conversations that you have with your friends here in the classroom. We record that and we share that with the world. I mean, that's pretty much what we do.
And, as a byproduct of it, I've been doing this since 2011 on jazz radio. I have a radio show, and then I have an interview series. I can't believe that podcasting has become this hip thing. It's in shows, it's in movies,
For
there's
sure.
advertisers, it's a shift in media and the way we consume it. It's amazing. Is that mind-blowing to you now that we've kind of come out of this pandemic and I mean, this is your business, this is your bread and butter. Is it something that's surprising to you that it's exploded the way it has?
I'm probably surprised that conversations have become an industry, but I'm all, I'm a capitalist by trade. So it naturally was like, well, how can we benefit ourselves and our investors from that? I've always been, even from a tot, I love the art of conversation. Loved it. Both my grandfathers. One was this Italian guy who had a milk route, so he naturally had to be gregarious and a storyteller to keep his clients and his clients engaged. And my other grandfather was a big sports hero in Dayton, Ohio. He was a well-known athlete who had a sporting goods franchise, and he too was just the most. I learned a lot on how to treat people, how to introduce yourself to individuals, how to make them feel comfortable. And it served me pretty well in my professional endeavors. So, but the point being to your original question was I've always loved the conversation of people, and I've always wondered, like, why aren't we recording more of these conversations and saving them? Now there's this theory in physics that everything that's happening in the universe is being recorded at the fringes of time. I'm not that smart to understand what that means, but essentially it's saying that the universe is recording itself, right?
Yeah.
And and that's really cool. How do you tap into that enormous database for knowledge share, for just convenience, or the comfort of a good conversation? So I find that stuff pretty fascinating. To be truthful, podcast industry hasn't grown as large as I thought it was going to grow. 2.5 billion in revenue this year as an industry. I mean, that's a small Fortune 1000 company,
Yeah.
right? I mean, it's not that big. And while radio industry is dying, that's still a $13.5 billion
Yeah.
industry. Linear's bigger, but that's declining too. Then cable's bigger, but that's declining as well. I think people thought the transfer of the ad revs would filter into podcasting at a faster rate than they probably have.
Yeah.
I think that's held the industry back. The wonderful thing about podcasting, it's a democratized technology. The worst thing about podcasting, it's a democratized technology. So you just have an oversupply,
Yeah.
and the brands are confused as to where to put their money, right?
Yeah.
So hopefully we can figure that out. People always liken this to, well, we just had a golden age of TV, with Netflix and all these video on demand. And that's true, but at its height, you had 570 TV shows.
Yeah.
I got 3 million podcasts that I got to battle with on a day-to-day basis, right?
Yes.
It's unfair. But so what do you have to do? I mean, really your logic would take you just got to aggregate as many of these downloads as you possibly can.
Yeah.
To realize the full growth of the industry.
So you clearly come from Regal family stock. What did you want to be in the third grade? What was your dream? Were you influenced by your family, or did you have other dreams?
I wanted to be a corporate banker. I always, I'd go downtown with my grandparents and and I'd see these guys in nice suits having great lunches. And I'm like, that, I would love to do that. And not really understanding what being a corporate banker was all about. I did become, after I graduated from MBA school with my MBA, National City Bank hired me in their corporate division. And it was the worst job I've ever had in my life. It was just awful. I then ended up going to the venture capital group, which is a lot more exciting because you're working with entrepreneurs. It's a little bit more risky. You're working in industries that are either under consolidation or heavy growth. It was just a different temperament. And I think that's what saved my early career, was getting out of corporate banking.
Yeah.
Although I did like the expense accounts, and they did pay for my first country club experience, so to speak. But I didn't have that mindset.
Yeah. Yeah. So let me ask you this. As someone that's obviously highly driven, having heroes and inspirations around us is a big deal. Who's your hero?
Well, there's a number of them. I mean, obviously my two grandfathers were just amazing individuals. My grandmother, who recently passed away at 101, was amazing at getting you to tell you her story, but she wasn't very forthcoming with hers. And I'm reflecting on the eulogy I gave. I finally, like about 10 years ago, I'm like, my God, she's getting up there in age, like 91 at the time. It's going to happen soon, right? And I sat her down and recorded her
Right on.
for over 2 days. And that was just a really amazing story. And I offered this to my family at the time, like, hey, I recorded Nana, love to give it out. And there's a big reluctance actually from the family, because my grandmother was a myth, this legendary person in the family. I don't think they wanted to hear the warts, right? The struggle, the foibles and faults. I think they just like, well, now we're good. When she passed away, though, they're like, hey, you still got those recordings? We'd like to hear those. So my grandmother had a strong influence on me. This high school teacher, my history high school teacher, was just an amazing cat. I love history. I love reading, and he really kind of tried to focus me on the creative endeavors. And there's like a gap for many years until I got to Cleveland, and I just got lucky of hanging out with some really cool, caring entrepreneurs, who just like, you got talent, kid. We got to focus that talent. There's a period of time up here. I lived a wild lifestyle and I loved it. Much younger than I am now, but I could handle it. But I was kind of rotating through a number of opportunities and jobs, and finally I got into this group. Where like, really, you've got some cool things going for you, but you gotta focus. And luckily, then I met my wife, and that's when I really got focused because we had a kid pretty early on, and I've been on the straight and narrow ever since. But a lot of influence. My grandparents, my grandmother, high school teacher, a couple of coaches in high school too. Then I just kind of got out of orbit in college and grad school a little bit, and finally got back into meeting a number of peers who I've bought businesses with, I've invested with. There's this core group, about 7 or 8 guys who I just hang out with, and I don't know what I would do without them. Quite frankly, I wouldn't be where I am today. And I would say recently, because just before I met my wife, my career was going a little sideways. Our founder funder, her name's Joan Andrews. Joan was like, I've heard a lot of good things about you. She had some hesitancy at first. Like, I've also heard some things, but she gave me the reins of the business, and I've never forgotten that. And I'm so appreciative of what she's given me, the investment that she's provided the company, the guidance. Like yesterday, we sat down, we had a very heart to heart of where the company's going to go in 2024, because you need that. Things that are driving her at the moment, which is always, an investor, you got to appease them in some capacity. Luckily, we've had investors just super patient. It's long-term thinking. So I've had a lot of respect for her, and what she's accomplished. When I was interviewing, she was like, I just adopted 4 kids. I'm going to adopt 4 more in Kakistan. I might not be around. Like, oh, okay, that's an unusual thing.
Oh.
Like, I'm starting in next week, right? So like, how's payroll going to get, how are we going to make all this stuff work? But it's been a great partnership, and that's been a good thing.
Yeah. So as a conversationalist, as someone that loves the art of conversation, who would be a dream person you would love to meet and interview?
Well, on a historical basis, be a lot, right? I mean, I'd love to sit down with like Galileo and just interview that guy. And you can name a historical figure I would love to dive in. I think Ronald Reagan probably would be another one. I'm just fascinated by that guy. This nondescript Midwesterner, just kind of broke some barriers down, got lucky, hard worker. I just found his trip amazing. I'd love to do a David Frost with Nixon, but it looked probably a bit more friendly, because I think
Yeah.
I tilt towards historical political characters in terms of conversation. I'm a big history nut, and I've written a few history books about Cleveland in particular. And there's just those types of characters I'm fascinated by. Like, what makes them tick?
Yeah.
The stamina, I think, of someone, especially today's modern presidency, the stamina that you have to have
Yeah.
at that level is just, I don't have it. Like, how do they do it? I mean, it's just amazing to me. So I think those types of characters for sure, I think would be just brilliant people. I don't need to hear more from entertainers or
Yeah.
movie stars, right?
Yeah.
They're all over, they're splashed everywhere. But those people who really make a difference, whether you know it or not, those are the people I want to talk to.
Absolutely. What's the best advice you've ever gotten?
Oh, I think early on, my I remember teasing a kid when I was younger. My grandfather seeing that. He didn't make a scene of it. He just, at some point, he pulled me aside, like, hey, I hate to break it to you, but you know better than them. There's no races. There is a human race of which you are a part of, right? And you need to treat people as if they're your kin. That we're all family in this, and which was a mind-boggling thing for him to say, because he was a 3-piece suit kind of a guy, and a working entrepreneur. So I always thought he had a bit of an elitist tag to him. Maybe probably couldn't resonate that as a younger person, but that just struck me like, man, we're just all in this together.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's really now, many years later, I did get involved in politics. I was working at the city of Cleveland for two mayors, and Cleveland's a minority majority city, so and it's like a European. There's everybody here. There's blacks and Asians and Europeans and Jews and Catholics. And I mean, it's a mixing pot, right? As most major cities are. And those wise words of "Hey, we're all kin" just served me well when I was
Yeah.
at the city of Cleveland.
So you clearly love the city you live in. What is the best thing about Cleveland?
Well, you always say the trite thing first. It's the people, but honestly, the history, this city, it's a story of almost like amazing success and incredible tragedy. Like it was the fifth largest city in the United States up until the 1950s, probably early 60s, and just been on a train wreck ever since. So there's generations of people who just know nothing of but retreat. And you can see, I mean, you drive around the city, you still see the legacy of the industrial age, at its height, and how it's just torn the city apart. Now it's recovered a little bit. The downtown looks great and certain, areas around downtown, but there's a good part of it that's pretty hard. It's a shame. I think it's the history. I just fell in love with this place from the historical point of view. And the questions are like, how did it get here? Why did it get here? It just blows my mind. And so when I was at the city, I could call up any building owner in town with like, I'm in economic development. I want to help you get this building or whatever you've got up and running again. And I got to see so much stuff that most people would never have seen because I could. And then I started like, well, let me go to the historical society and ask questions about this building or this person. And they're so gracious. And I started writing a blog at some point about the city of Cleveland. And then I got a publisher calling me from History Press about, hey, we'd like to start having you write books. And so it's been a pretty wild ride, but I think the history is the most engaging thing of Cleveland.
Yeah.
And then the second thing is it's just the potential.
Yeah.
It could be great again. It's got everything here that you'd want,
Mhm.
for a city to be super successful.
I want the Indians to win a championship so bad. Like I still remember seeing Terry Francona cards when I was a kid, and I can't believe how much he's changed. Sometimes I'm like, is that the same dude?
Yeah, unfortunately, he retired, and I don't know what. The Guardians did hire somebody, a little younger, so we'll see how it goes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the whole family around that team is just fantastic, man.
Yeah.
Just super Midwestern, if that's a term. So polite, uh, very interested in you and your success, and that kind of translates to the team. So when Joan and I talk, we really use a lot of baseball and sports metaphors,
Yeah.
like in building on how to build a team and maximize everyone's potential because it's a language that they understand and they're talking about or using every day. So that's been pretty cool,
Yeah.
to have some orbit with them and the team a little bit.
Yeah. So Michael, everyone has a perception of you. Family, friends, all of the employees, coworkers, but you're the one that's in control of you. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
Well, self-reflection is always the hardest thing, right? That we have to. I think people would say pretty creative guy, almost a Renaissance person. But I got my wife knows this better than most. Like I got some demons from my past that unfortunately spark out on occasion. So I'm flawed. A lot of talent, but flawed. I think if you were to boil it down to one sentence, like just I've got a lot of wisdom. I'm like at 54. I've been through a lot. Pretty patient, relative. But if I could just control some of my flaws a little better, I think I would be a really solid executive, really solid leader. Just working on those flaws. Which is interesting that, Joan and I yesterday talked about, like, what are your flaws? It's interesting for someone to care about you enough to ask that question and how you want to work on those things. But ultimately, I think it's like really talented person, just like any other human, got some flaws I need to work on. It's an interesting question. I will say this one last thing. I've always aspired for greatness, but no one tells you how to get there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And that's the greatest mystery I think God puts in front of us. Like, how are you going to succeed?
Yeah.
It's easy to succeed and it's easy to fail. They're both equally opportunistic. It's like, what can you learn from the failures and how can you really exponentially grow your successes? And I think that's what we all, I worry sometimes I've leveled out.
Right.
We talked about talent with Patrick Mahomes, and guy's just got an extraordinary talent.
Yeah.
But even his talent maximizes out just so far ahead of everybody else.
Yeah.
You don't see, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's what I'm struggling with right now. It's like, how far can I maximize my talent? And how much farther do I want to go?
Yeah.
Professionally.
So you obviously have a deep thirst for, history and just adventure. And I'm curious if you could get into a time machine. We get off the phone, the DeLorean pulls up in front of the building, and you can get in and punch the digits and see any event in human history with your own eyes. Where are you going?
Probably, not probably, definitely to the construction of one of the seven ancient wonders. Just deep history, because you're talking about building the pyramids at a time where I think we thought everybody was, wearing loincloths, right? And trying to take down, large mammals. And here's like humans crafting just extraordinary engineering feats at a point in history where, again, I think most of us would think it was backwards, and it wasn't. Very sophisticated language, written language, engineering, all of these things. I would just love to see humanity building one of these amazing things that still exist today. That would just be amazing for me to see.
Blown. Yeah,
totally.
Would. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Michael, if anyone wants to dig into your history, your life, your company, anything about you, where's the best place on the web for them to go?
Well, for the company, evergreenpodcast.com. And personally, just a good Google search. I've got a few books out there on Cleveland history, and my LinkedIn profile, which has all my contact information. One of the great things of being on shows all over is people reach out and connect. It's like this morning, someone from LinkedIn reached out to me. He's Polish, but he's living in Spain. He's creating some new podcast technology. He's probably reaching out in the dark, but I did answer. Right. And we ended up having like a 20-minute conversation on his particular technology he's working on a podcast. That's really cool. I love stuff like that. Yeah. So I'm always open for a good conversation.
Cool. Michael, this has been fascinating. Thank you, sir. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your story. Best of luck with everything.
Joe, it's just you're a great, easy person to talk to and with. And so I wish you, just super success with the show and keep talking, man.
Yeah, we got to get it out there.